Hello and welcome to Modelkit Stuff. My name is Jason and this is episode 1 of airbrushing from new starter to successful. In this series of videos I'm going to be looking at how to get started in the art of airbrushing, and we're going to be working through the process of getting you to being able to use your airbrush successfully with confidence from having never had an airbrush before and not having any of the equipment. So in this first video we're going to look at equipment, setting a budget, how to build the budget and make sure that you've covered off everything you need, and how to balance your budget, what to focus on, what not to focus on. So we're going to start with the question that I am always asked, and I see lots of people asking this question and lots of people get incomplete answers. I'm often asked, and it's probably the most common question from people who don't airbrush or have maybe started airbrushing with a cheap airbrush and now want to upgrade, is what's the best airbrush to get? And the answer is that's the wrong question, because it's not as important as some of the other bits of equipment that you might buy, namely your compressor. I will explain all of this. I know that the airbrush is the bit that puts the paint on, and it's the bit that looks really cool, and it's the bit you come into close action with and you interact with, and you've got to feel is the right tool and instrument for the job. But it's actually all of these airbrushes you're looking here. You know, there's 3 different brands here and they all fundamentally work the same. Yes, there's differences. There's differences in quality, there's differences in functionality, there's differences in how they take the paint from the paint cup and put it on your model. And it depends on what sort of compressor you've got, which of these airbrushes you could use. And it depends on where you are, what sort of compressor you might want. So this might not be the most exciting video you've ever watched, but if you've never airbrushed or you're a beginner, it may well be the most important, because so many people get told buy the most expensive airbrush you can get, and that's an incomplete answer. And it's not necessarily true anymore. So let's start at the beginning, shall we? So first 2 things we need to think about, which is going to help dictate what equipment we're buying, is your budget and where are you going to do your airbrushing. Both of these are important because they're going to dictate what sort of machinery and fittings and equipment you actually need. So, for example, if you are going to be doing it in your garage and you're going to set up a space in your garage, then you will need different equipment, or can have different equipment, than you may end up having if you, like me, do your airbrushing in the kitchen. Yeah, so it all depends. Budget is another deciding factor, because what we are going to do is we're going to select our compressor first, and then we're going to get all the other sundry items that we need, and then that's going to leave us with how much do we have left for an airbrush, and that's how we do it. So it doesn't matter whether you are dipping your toe in, or know that you're committed to learning this and you're going to upgrade as time goes on, or money doesn't matter and you're just let's get the best of everything we can get and then get motoring, and that'll be my start point. Doesn't matter where you are on that scale with the budgets, you still have to consider where you are, and that is still going to dictate what we end up buying. So once you've thought about where your going to be and how much your budget is, and it's not going to be coins, it's going to be notes, I'm afraid, then we can start to build a picture of what you need. And the most important thing for anybody that's going to start airbrushing is the compressor. It is literally, if you get this wrong, then it's going to make a difference to not just the equipment you've got, the environment you're in when you're airbrushing, but how that paint goes on your model and how good your model is ultimately. So let's start by looking at compressors. So there are 3 different types of compressor in the main. There is some variations to that statement, but as far as most model builders are concerned, there is 3 that you would tend to consider, and in fact out of that 3 there's only really 2 that are commonly used. So the first one in there is the compact compressor, and the compact compressor is like it says, it's the smallest compressor and it takes up the least space. So if you're going to be bringing your compressor out when you airbrush and then putting it away again, that's definitely a factor. This is the smallest you can get. It's also the cheapest you can get, typically from between £50 to £100. And it works by pushing air through the air hose into your airbrush like all the others. But what it does is it doesn't give you a constant flow of air. What it does is it gives you a push of air through, and you get it in waves, so you have a pulse. So every time the compressor pushes the air through, you get air go up the tube through your airbrush and atomize with your paint and come through. So you're getting a pulse of air. You might not see it, you might not feel it, but you're getting a pulse of air. You're not getting a consistent flow of air, and that can cause you 1 or 2 minor issues that you're going to have to learn to deal with when you're airbrushing. You're more likely to get tip dry, for example, on the end of your needle. But depending on your budget and depending on the requirements of where you're going to put it, the compact could be a good starting point for first timers. And if you've got a small budget, it might well be that that's the way you have to go. It still works. You're still going to be able to spray paint onto your model, and it's a good starting point. Next up from that is the air tank compressor. And fundamentally, you've got the same compressor as a compact compressor, but with the addition of an air tank. And in this case, what's happening is that the airbrush is drawing air from the air tank, and the compressor is backfilling the air tank with more air. So it's still pulsing the air in, but the air is being pulsed into the tank, and the airbrush is taking air from the tank and it's getting a continuous supply. Now, the other advantage of an air tank compressor is that the compressor isn't running all the time. So the compressor only needs to run when it needs to build up air in the tank again. So what will happen is that the compressor will run in intervals. So it'll run and then it'll stop, and then it'll run and then it'll stop when it keeps refilling the tank. That means it reduces the noise, because a compact compressor that we just talked about runs all the time. And one of the drawbacks of the compact type is that they can overheat and then cut out. They can get very hot. So generally, the air tank compressor will give you a more continuous airflow, which will offer you a few less issues on your airbrush. You can still get tip dry, obviously, but you're less prone to it. It's quieter, and it's not running all the time. Obviously, it's bigger because you've got an air tank underneath. Usually they're stacked with either the compressor mounted onto the tank or the tank mounted onto the compressor, and quite often they come in a little box case. So they're bigger and they take up more space. Usually you can take the metal box case off if you want to reduce the size, but you lose the handle and you may even lose the mounting feet if you do that. But it is an option if space is a premium. They're also obviously more expensive, and they will go from anywhere between £100 to £300 typically. You can pay more. So yeah, it's a more expensive piece of equipment and it takes up more space, but it does give you some advantages. The most important one probably being noise. So the third type of compressor to consider is an oil compressor. Now these are least used by modelers, but they are really the professional airbrushers' choice. An oil compressor is much larger. It takes up a lot more space. But if you're going to be doing it in the garage, you may well think that you can easily put that in. The other consideration of an oil compressor is they are silent or almost silent. So if noise is a real issue, if maybe you're doing this in the spare bedroom upstairs and every time your compressor comes on no one can hear the TV, you might want to consider an oil compressor because they are virtually silent. The downside, other than the size, is the cost, and typically an oil compressor will cost you somewhere between £500 and £900. So it does consume a fair amount of your budget. But those are the three basic types. So what else do you need before we even think about the airbrush? Well, there is lots of things that you have to have right at the start. It's not as simple as a compressor and an airbrush. So first thing we need to consider is you may need one of these. This is a regulator, and some compressors will come with them, some compressors won't come with them and you'll have to buy it separately. So you need one of these, and these can cost anywhere between £18 for a simple one like this to £40 for a more complex one that maybe runs multiple lines and so on. And you want to get one that has a moisture trap in like this, which allows you to release any moisture that builds up. That's important because you don't want moisture going into your airline, because then you're going to have moisture going into your paint mix. So you need to trap it and you need to be able to release it, because you do get condensation build up in the compressor. The other important reason why you want one of these is this is going to tell you what your air pressure is that you're running through your airbrush. And later on, when you're starting to get to grips with your airbrush, that's going to be quite important, knowing what your running pressure is. So if you buy a compact one, you're going to want to put this onto the compressor and then put your airline onto this. So basically, what you will do is you'll probably have a thread, something like that, coming out of your compressor that your airline attaches to. But instead you'll add this onto your compressor and then you'll run your airline out of there. So you need to have a regulator. It's really important to help you become accomplished at using your airbrush. Then you need an airline. So your airline is going to take the air from your compressor to your airbrush, and they come in all sorts of different types. They come in rubber, in plastic, braided like these ones. You can get them in coils and all sorts, and it depends on how you're setting your airbrush up. So again, you need to think about it and make sure that you understand the distance between where you keep your airbrush, where you're going to be using your airbrush, and where your compressor is. Now for me, my compressor is under my desk, and so I only need a short bit of hose. But if you're going to put yours in one room and then you're going to airbrush in another room just to keep the noise down, you'll need a longer bit of airline. So you'll need to work that out. And airlines can be anything between 17 and 40 pounds. So depending on the length, the material and all that sort of stuff. So it's your choice what you go with. Now, there are differences. So firstly, you've got to make sure that it fits onto your compressor. So that you might have a different diameter screw. So, you know, you might find that the standard one, which is I think 1/8, if memory serves me, is sort of the standard fitting, but this is a larger fitting, and I need that for one of my airbrushes actually. I don't tend to use that airbrush anymore, so I don't use it very often. But yeah, you may find that you need to get an adapter as well if you've got an oversized fitting for some reason. You can also get airlines that have built-in quick releases. So this one here has a built-in quick release. We'll talk more about those in a minute. Now, if you don't have a built-in quick release, and I'll show you now, this is what a quick release is. This is the female part. So your airline might come like that with two standard fittings, and then what you want to do is buy a quick fitting unit. And so what the quick connect allows you to do is quickly connect your airbrush to the airline, rather than if you don't have one of these, then what you have to do is, I'm not sure I'll be able to take this off, yes I can, is you'll actually have to screw your airbrush into the end of the line like that, which can be a pain when you want to strip your airbrush down for cleaning. So quick connects are anything between £5 and £10. They're relatively cheap to get, and I do recommend that all of your airlines have them. You can actually buy them as separate parts, so you probably want to buy a male part for every airbrush you've got, which is what I do, and then just have the female part on the airlines, and then you can swap your airbrushes out as you go. So you've got those to consider as well. So that is your compressor sorted and connecting your airbrush to your compressor sorted. But it doesn't end there. You've got lots more to think about. So if you're going to be using an airbrush, you're going to be putting paint through it, you're going to have to clean it. So we need some cleaning brushes. You can buy cleaning sets that have pipe cleaners in them and swabs in them and wipes and stuff. Don't bother. What you really need is cleaning brushes like this, and they come, this is a common type that come with them all attached like this, and there's different thicknesses. You need those different thicknesses to get in and effectively clean different areas. You can see these are getting quite worn now. Or you can buy them in sets like this, where they're actually loose individual brushes, but come in a bag. Or you can buy individual brushes. They've all got their advantages and disadvantages, but as long as you've got a selection of brushes of different sizes to get into different areas of your airbrushes, that's pretty much the main thing that you need. And these will cost you anywhere between £4 and £7, so shop around. You also probably want to get one of these. And the idea of this, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about stripping and cleaning airbrushes, is to get inside and clean any dried paint from inside your nozzle. And you can pick these up for a couple of pounds in any airbrush retailer, and even some online model shops will stock these. The next item you need to consider, but isn't essential, is a cleaning pot. So what this does is it allows you, when you've finished your painting job and you've still got paint in your paint cup, it allows you to put your airbrush in and decant the remaining paint into your air cup, into the cleaning pot, and then you can put your cleaning liquids in and flush your airbrush out into the pot as well. It captures all of that, and then when you've finished, you can take the top off like so, and give it a good wash out, and job's done. It's quite heavy, and this is probably the most common type used. It's quite heavy and it has a little thing on it. So when your airbrush is resting on there and it's got the airline on that might be pulling it, it can't be pulled over because this stops it from doing it. And you have a little filter there that you can replace. So they're not essential. You could maybe make one if you're on a tight budget. Something like a large Tupperware bowl or something like that, and put a hole in it so you can put your airbrush in. That'll do exactly the same job. So you don't have to buy one. I also use one of these, and this is an old takeaway pot actually. And what I do with this is, if I've got a lot of paint left in my paint cup, I tip it out into here first and then clean my airbrush rather than trying to run it all the way through the brush. So you definitely want to consider a cleaning pot, but it's not essential. They will cost typically around £12. You shouldn't be paying any more than that, but shop around. You might be able to pick yourself up a bargain. They're quite widely available. Most airbrush stockists will have them. But you'll also need a stand for your airbrushes. So when you're working with your airbrush and it's connected on the airbrush and maybe it's got paint in and you've got to put it down, you need to be able to put it down, because you can't put this full of paint in down on your workbench clearly. So if you've got one of these, it does double as a paint airbrush stand as well, which is something we're thinking about. But if you're not going to get one of those, or you want to have them in a separate area, you can get something like this, and this one holds actually 4. I've taken the fittings off for 2 of them because they sort of get in the way, but I store 2 airbrushes on there with the airlines attached. But you can get 4 on this one. You can get some that just do 1. So this one has the advantage that it bolts down onto your desk. But you can it also comes with a fitting, so you can attach it to this here like that. You can unscrew that red ring, and it has a little bit that sticks out there, and you can actually put it on your compressor as well if you want. So they're quite flexible. This particular type will cost you some. Well, you can spend anywhere between £10 for a cheaper one like this, maybe even less for a single airbrush one, to silly money. You can spend 40 quid on an on a stand that looks stylish and all flash Gordon and everything. But at the end of the day, just remind yourself that this is about functional, practical requirements and not looking cool. But if you really like them and your budget comes to it, then you can spend 40 quid on your stand if you like. Okay, after that, we actually need some cleaner. So you need to clean your airbrush, and the thinners for your paint will be a good starting point. You can use the thinners, but when you've stripped the airbrush down and you want to give it a good scrub, a good airbrush cleaner is recommended. And if you do, like I do, both enamels and acrylics, you probably want a cleaner for each type, because this one isn't going to be any good for your enamels, and this one ain't going to be very good for your acrylics. So you need at least 1, maybe 2 different types of airbrush cleaner, depending on what paint systems you're going to be using with your airbrush. And they cost anywhere between £5 and £20 per bottle, depending on the size of the bottle, whether it's branded, so on and so forth. So have a shop around. 1 generic acrylic cleaner and 1 generic enamel cleaner will do. And for enamel, you can even use white spirit, and that won't harm your airbrush if you've got the right airbrush, and we will come to that. So the next thing you've got to think about is personal protection. So you need a good mask. That's not something like this. That's a dust mask. You need one that has the right filters for particles. Obviously, we're atomizing paint. That's going into the air. Only a percentage of it's going on your model. You do not want to be breathing it in. It has nasty long-term effects, which you might not feel right away, but just like smoking, you will do later on. So you want to have a good mask. I recommend a mask like this with detachable, reusable filters. You can take these off, and you can buy filters and the little dust covers separately. So what you can do is every now and then take these off. Because I'm on camera, it's going to be difficult, isn't it? Take these off and give that a wash. Replace the filter. You can see I've got some new ones there. You can see how much stuff that I've breathed in, sucked in, and hasn't got through to me. All of that would have gone into my lungs. So yeah, periodically change your filters and your dust covers. So a decent face mask like this can cost you anywhere between £40 and £60. This is a 3M1. There are other brands that do the same thing. What I would say is make sure that you can easily get access to replacements and that you don't get stuck not being able to get the filters for them. But you can get these at places like Screwfix. Hardware stores will sell these, or you can get them from online airbrushing stores as well. Finally, you should consider a paint booth. This one is mine. It folds away and it's portable, or you can join it together to make two. There's different approaches to paint booths. You can make them, and they come in all sorts of varieties. The most effective ones are the ones with the water curtain at the back, which is how big industrial paint booths are set up. But you really don't need that in a small environment, and if you're setting up and packing away, then one of these little foldable ones is a good idea. You don't need a paint booth depending on where you are, but I recommend it if you're doing it indoors and you've got family around. These work with a hose that comes out of the back, so you can shove it out of a window and it basically sucks the paint, the atomized paint, through a filter and out through the hose at the back. And they're a great way of keeping the air fresh and circulated while you're extracting and painting, especially in the winter when you don't want all your doors and stuff open for ventilation. But if you've got good ventilation and you can open doors and you can open the garage door, and then all you actually need is a space to do it. These are really handy, however, if you've got a small space. And a paint booth is going to cost you somewhere between £150 and £500, depending on what type you get and how much you want to spend. So I've done a little sample budget to show you how to work out what's the right airbrush for you. So taking our costs, and I've worked at the budget end and said that I've got a budget of $250, could be dollars, could be whatever you want it to be. Then taken all the essentials, I've left off one of the expensive items, which is a paint booth, because that's something you can always add later and save up for, and isn't essential depending on where you are. So by the time you've got a compressor, a regulator, that's the compact compressor at the cheaper end, and I've assumed you've not got it at the £50 price that you can pick them up for. Airline, quick connect, cleaning brushes, cleaning pot, cleaning liquid, a stand and a mask, you're at £185. So that leaves you with a small pot of money to get your airbrush. So do you get the most expensive airbrush you can get that spends the rest of your budget? Well, I would suggest not. I think doing a budget like this will help you make the right decision. So I would strongly suggest you look at something like this. This is the Gallery Advanced GHAD 39. This is an entry-level airbrush and it covers everything that the modeler needs. It gives you 2 paint pots, 2 needle sizes, a 0.35 and a 0.05, which will cover the whole spectrum of spraying that you need to do. It has really nice features and is really lovely to use and easy to clean. I have done a review of it. I will leave a link in the text underneath the video. This at the moment, it retails for $46, but if you buy it out at the moment, and I'm recording this on the 7th of March 2024, it's currently retailing on their website for $30. And if you use the link that I will put in the website, to the website, and go through that link, you'll ensure that you get the best current offers, which is 35% off. It will probably cost you more if you buy it on places like Amazon and the like. So if you went for this, which is, I love this airbrush, and spent just, I'm going to say 30 because I'm converting into UK pounds, then that would leave you with another £35 that you can add onto your 60, which might just get you a better compressor with a tank. And you'd be far better spending the money on the compressor than an expensive airbrush, because at £65 you're not going to get anything that's you're not going to get one of the big brands for that sort of money and have it have the features that you get on this. So that's how I would do it. I would recommend you look at your situation, you look at your budget, and base everything around your compressor, because that's the most important thing. Okay, that's it for this first episode. This was about getting your head in the right place and you understanding what you need to do to get your equipment. I look forward to talking to you more in the next episode. Until then, you enjoy your modelling, and I will see you very soon. Bye for now.
Hi, and thanks for watching. You can support the channel by hitting the like button, and if you haven't subscribed, please consider the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you don't miss any content that I put out. Modelkit Stuff is a self-funded channel, and I don't do membership or Patreon or buy me a coffee. So if you'd like to further donate to the channel and ensure the cameras keep rolling and the content keeps coming, then you can consider making a donation through my PayPal. You will find a link to that in the text below. You enjoy your modelling, and I'll see you soon.